payments were probably that bit later this year. The ANC advance payments commenced, Catherine, on the 17th, roughly, of October there, and the BISS and the CRISS advance payments continued to clear there on, we'll say, the 24th of October, and eco payments came at the end around the 30th, 31st of October there for a lot of farmers. So there's a lot of payments left to come, we'd say. The balancing of those is due on the start of December there for all cleared cases.
Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc Beef podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan, and with more than 1.8 billion in payments expected to be issued to farmers before the end of the year, I'm joined by Teagasc Advisor Keith Fahy from County Galway to discuss what farmers need to do to ensure payments are made and when payments are expected to be issued. Keith, you're very welcome. When can farmers be expected to be paid for BISS, CRISS and the Eco Scheme and ANC?
Yeah, so I suppose this year, probably, the first round of the new cap, there was probably a bit of a delay. Farmers were used to maybe getting their ANC, I suppose, usually a week or two before the week of the ploughing. But as it was the new round of the cap, as I said, payments are slightly later this year, Catherine. So I suppose they're promising us that next year that the payments will probably revert to last year's dates, and that, the similar dates to the ANC, the BISS, the CRISS, the Eco. And that, so I suppose our BISS is our new BPS, and then you have your CRISS and your Eco, similar to the greening and that. And so the payments were probably that bit later this year. The ANC advance payments commenced, Catherine, on the 17th, roughly, of October there, and the BISS and the CRISS advance payments continued to clear there on, we'll say, the 24th of October, and eco payments came at the end around the 30th, 31st of October there for a lot of farmers. So there's a lot of payments left to come, we'd say. The balancing of those is due on the start of December there for all cleared cases. Maybe a couple of issues there, Catherine, maybe to note. There was a couple of issues I've seen there with farmers, maybe with commonages. I think the department were trying to clear up a few maybe issues in relation to the amount of shares claimed in different commonages, and in some cases they might have looked for proof of ownership in certain conditions or certain cases there. So I did notice that a good few of the commonages were slower to get paid, but when you did contact them, or the farmers contacted them, they were able to maybe give a rough date or time when the payments were to be released and that. So that was probably one issue. The young farmer scheme, probably a lot of farmers, or maybe where there was partnerships or changes to herd numbers, from what I've seen there, we'll say commonages changes to herd numbers, and that were the last maybe to get paid, Catherine. So that's just a couple of information there in relation to the schemes.
And for any farmers that might have joined the Young Farmer Scheme, what else might they have to do now to make sure that the payments are made?
Just to make sure of a couple of things there, maybe keep an eye on the online correspondence there via your own ag food individual login, or via your agent's ag food login. Keep an eye on it, that maybe they're not looking for, we'd say, maybe there might have been an issue in relation to a joint herd or a joint bank account maybe set up, or maybe there was an issue with a letter of equivalence, or maybe we'll say the education cert being uploaded, if there was a small issue there or anything like that. They might look for maybe additional information, maybe such as a clearer page with the both names on the bank account, or whatever the case may be. And just to be careful there as well, to note, we've seen a couple of cases down through the years where maybe farmers, if you're in a joint herd number or a partnership or whatever, or there's a young trained farmer, all payments, all cattle sales, all milk sales, any grants, all that, they all must go through the same joint bank account. We've seen a couple of times maybe where cattle were sold and maybe it was a genuine error, or maybe for whatever reason, farmers may have lodged, we'll say, cattle sales or a check from the mart or the factory or whatever to maybe their own old account, just to make sure. Because if you do get a young farmer CISYF inspection, they will look at the payments there. They will look at the bank account to make sure that payments are going through, and that all payments, and they might look for the lowest and the largest. So they might look at a docket, maybe a purchase, and they'll see that it corresponds with the bank account. And they will also look at, maybe a farmer sold 10 or 12 weanings at the mart or whatever, and they will look for that. They might look at the docket, and they might look at the correspondence to see that it was lodged correctly.
That's great, Keith. Something for farmers to keep in mind that have gone into a joint partnership or joint herd number this year. In relation to the Agri-Climate Rural Environmental Scheme, also known as ACRES, what requirements have farmers to do to complete for this year, and when will payments expect to be paid for that?
So, just maybe to go on the payment side of things, there's talks that December, first part of the payment will issue, for 2023. There was a number of things I suppose that have to be done this year. A lot of the scoring was done there for your low input grassland, and low input grassland peat. So your lig and your commonages, so they had to be scored, we'd say, in year 1, 3, and 5. So next year for most doesn't have to be scored. What else is there in relation to payments? I suppose there's the different payments there. For the low emission slurry spreading, they have to be uploaded there at the minute. So if you get your receipt from your contractor, a farmer can do it themselves, or the advisor can do it. So if you go in and you can claim your payment, so it has to be in meter cubed, Catherine. So just maybe if any farmer is unaware that 1 meter cubed is equal to 220 gallons of slurry. So we'll say, for example, a farmer spread 10 2,200 gallon tankers, that'd be roughly 10 meters cubed per tank at 10. So that'd be, by 10 would be 100 meters cubed. So they get €1.20 per meter cubed. So that'd equate to about €120 or €12 per load, roughly, towards the low emission slurry spreading, which can be a dribble bar, trailing shoe, or the disc, or the injection, excuse me. So that's just information on that. So farmers must, you have to also put in, Catherine, your fields that you put it in. So, your land parcel numbers there. So, to correspond what slurry you put out, to match the field. A lot of the actions probably don't have to be done, we'd say, until maybe March or May next year. We'll say for the likes of, your barn owl boxes, we'd say a good few farmers would have gone for those, and they were supposed to be put up by the 31st of July there. Looking at the rare breeds, probably it'll be January really when you'll have to put in the amount of numbers, we'll say, of each breed you had or whatever. For example, if farmer had 4 Connemara ponies, they'll have to do a rare breed declaration form. And the main reason for that is obviously the department won't know how much to pay them in relation to that. So they get paid up to 20 livestock units there at €200 per livestock unit. So just to keep a rough idea of the amount of rare breeds you have and the different months you have them as well. Copsing the hedgerows has to be done by the end of December next year, the 24th. And there's, I suppose, the trees, planting of the orchards and the trees and that. So you have your kind of planting trees in a riparian buffer zone, you're planting your orchard, and you're planting your new hedgerows. And just to be aware there, when you are buying them, that they are native providence and you have the passports for them. So they have to be in by the end of March 2024. What else, maybe dates to keep in mind? We'll say your winter bird flu has to be in by the 15th of May each year. So that's about 2 weeks earlier than the previous. And that's €1,000 per hectare now. I suppose it was 900 in the old wild bird cover, it was called before. Now it's called wild bird food plot. So the payment for that has gone up to €100. That's €1,000 a hectare.
That's great, Keith. So a lot of the details will be next year, I suppose, from the dates that you've outlined there to be carried out, particularly for the different actions the farmers might have selected for the acre scheme. In relation to the National Dairy Beef Welfare Scheme, is there anything that farmers have left to do this year, and when are payments expected to be made for that programme?
The payments are supposed to issue the same time roughly as the balancing payments for the ANC, the BISS, the CRISS, and the ECOS. It's around the first week in December. The 4th there, Catherine, is the date they've given us, the 4th of December. So payments should issue to that, where there's no issue there. So as part of the National Dairy Beef Welfare Scheme, weights had to be uploaded by the end of October there. So farmers got paid up to 50 calves at €20 a head. So there was the opportunity, I suppose, for farmers there, whoever was buying maybe dairy bred calves or reared dairy calves, they had to be over 12 weeks of age when you weighed them. They had to be on the farm for at least 10 days, and they had to be out of a dairy bred dam, so a dairy bred dam. So we'll say like a Frisian or whatever there, and they could be out of a beef bull or a dairy bull if it was Frisian bull calves, but obviously the payment wasn't there for dairy Frisian dairy replacement heifer calves. So yeah, there was a fairly good uptake in that. It had been 40 calves in the past, so it's increased to 50 there. So it's a fairly good payment there for farmers, €1,000. And look at it's a great way, especially for farmers, to keep an eye on the weights to make sure that that they're on target there, that you're looking at maybe 220 there. Them kind of calves should be around the 220 kilos at this stage maybe. And if they're not, maybe to look at your silage, make sure it's of good quality, and if it's not, you might have to supplement them there with an extra kilo meal, so they don't want to be getting 1.5 kilos or maybe 2 kilos if the silage is inadequate there. And make sure they've plenty feed space as well is very important. And fecal egg sample them too, Catherine. Sometimes where the game is lost in a lot of cases, where maybe farmers are finishing cattle or rearing dairy bred stock, the first winter can be a massive losing ground, we'd say, for weight gain. So you're hoping that they might be gaining 0.5, 0.6 at a very minimum there over the winter. So, that there was 100 days or 120 days that they're putting on that 60, 70 kilos there over the winter, and that they're coming out, at a good weight out for grass, and try to get them out as early as possible. And look, they are, lighter type stock, and it is a lot easier to get the likes of those out earlier, I suppose, than your heavier suckler cows, so that they can get out that bit earlier. But we're finding that a lot of farmers that are in the scheme are really finding the weighing beneficial. And I've even seen a good few of the farmers that I deal with, while they're weighing once for the scheme, they're also weighing maybe another time or two during the year as well. And finding that if farmers are going into the scheme, that whether they get paid or not, they are definitely very interested, and they're getting better at training their eye as well, and guessing the weights of their own stock maybe.
Most definitely, Keith, the benefits are far and away in the length of the scheme for sure. For farmers that have joined the Suckler Carbon Efficiency Programme, also known as SCEP, what requirements have they left to do before the end of the year, and when can payments be expected for that programme?
Yes, the payments are expected to be there for December as well. So there's a number of different actions there. So for your Suckler Carbon Efficiency Programme, the SCEP is called, replaced the BDGP scheme. There's 5 actions there, Catherine. You must have an eligible bull, or you must do eligible AI there. There's the female replacement strategy. You have to do genotyping, weighing and submission of weights to ICBF. So kind of similar there to your National Dairy Beef Welfare Scheme. They had to be in around the same time. Calving details and calving surveys. So look at, most farmers, it's much the same, we'd say, as it was for the suckler scheme, the BDGP. A lot of the farmers went for that, we'd say, that were in the BDGP. But I suppose a big one there, Catherine, is that, in contrast, I suppose, to the BDGP, anyone in the Suckler Carbon Efficiency Programme scheme now must be board BIA approved. So we had a good few farmers there, maybe, that were probably selling weanlings in the Galway area there, and maybe weren't board BIA approved. And look, rightly or wrongly, a lot of farmers kind of made the argument that, they weren't getting an extra payment. If they're selling weanlings, they're not going to get much extra if they're board BIA approved or not. But, that was a bit of an argument there at a few of the meetings we held. But anyway, look, the long and short of it is, to get the SCEP payments, they have to be board BIA approved. So that's just part of that. So they have to be, it's a big change for a lot of farmers there, but a lot of them are, recording all the data anyways. And look, it's just, it's something there. I suppose it is giving some farmers as well the option maybe to finish some of their own cattle as well. Just in relation to some of the information on that, they must also calve at least 50% beef bred animals of the yearly reference number there between the 1st July and the 30th of June 2023, and they have to attend a training course there as well by the 15th of November 2024. So, and just maybe to, how do they come up with the SCEP payment? It's what they do is kind of called an eligible hectare. So it's the number of cows that are calved, or your reference number, divided by 1.5. So we'll say, for example, if you had 15 hectares or 15 cows calved, you divide that by 1.5, and that'll give you 10 MPAs, maximum payable area, or hectares. And you get paid, we'll say there's different payment rates there of of 10 and 6.66, we'd say. So payments of 225 for the first 15 hectares and 180 for the remaining after that. So that's just giving you a rough example there. If a farmer had 10, it'd be 6.66 hectares, or as I said earlier, if a farmer had 15 cows, it'd be 10 hectares. So you're multiplying your 10 then by 225, because that's less than 15 hectares. So you have the farmer there with maybe 15 suckler cows to potentially get 2,250.
That's great, Keith. And farmers had the option of applying for the National Beef Welfare Scheme, which was a 1-year programme. What do farmers have to do to ensure that they get paid this year, and when will payments be expected?
Yeah, so the payments roughly is around the same time there as the SCEP payment, from what we hear, are around the same time as the Dairy Beef Welfare Scheme, the first week or so in December. So there was two main parts of that were mandatory. One of them was meal feeding. So that was part, I suppose, last year we had the beep scheme and the meal feeding, and the weighing was part of that. But this year it's the meal feeding weanling, so they have to feed them 4 weeks prior and 2 weeks post weaning with a ration or whatever there. So that was one part of it, and the other part of it then was testing, blood testing the herd for IBR. So that's just a lot of the farmers went to blood test this year. In terms of uptake, I seen a good few of my own farmers probably didn't go for it, which was a pity, because of the blood testing. A lot of them made the argument, Catherine, that what they were getting for the blood testing was costing them in the vet. But however, look at, I suppose it's a good way of finding out the herd, the health status of your herd. Yeah, I was kind of hoping there'd be more uptake there. I think there were nationally, there's been definitely wasn't oversubscribed there, but most farmers were feeding meal anyways, so that was a good one. But the IBR sampling, I suppose the blood testing, it did add a fair cost to the farmers, to get the vet out, have to put the cattle in, would say, or whatever. But so the rates of payment there, Catherine, it depended on the number of animals you had. The meal feeding was €35 per calf, up to a maximum of 40 calves. But the IBR then, the rates of payment was a minimum of 120 up to 300 per herd. But we had a lot of maybe smaller type farmers there in Galway, maybe with 15, 20 cows, and they were finding that the cost of blood testing them was actually more than what they were getting from the IBR rate of payment from the scheme. So, but look, there I suppose there was, if you had 20 calves there for the meal feeding part of it, you were getting €700. That's nearly going to buy 2 ton of meal for a lot of farmers. So that's just the National Beef Welfare Scheme, Catherine.
Thanks, Keith. And I suppose the final schemes really are in relation to the fodder scheme that farmers would have applied for. When are the payments expected for the fodder scheme?
Yes, the fodder scheme the next couple of weeks as well as in December, as far as I know on that one, Catherine. Farmers would have got, is it 60%, I think, roughly. I could be correct in that now. So farmers got paid, we'd say, on the double last year. So they would have got paid the full amount. So you got paid €100 per hectare up to 10 hectares last year. So farmers would have got their €1,000. And then they got, I think it was it 550 or 60% last year. So I'd be thinking a lot of farmers would be getting about 40% this year. So if they did max out, there's probably about 400 remaining there for a lot of farmers that cut over maybe 25 acres of silage. And look, Catherine, a big one there, and you've been talking about it as well before on the podcast. And silage winter budgets there is going to be a massive one this year. It's a very wet year. Some farmers were back maybe a little bit on silage. There probably wasn't a massive reserve left on last year. But just to make sure that farmers have plenty silage, and if they don't, now is the time to act, because silage could be very, very scarce in the spring, especially where maybe some farmers might have fed a small bit of straw there to maybe suckler cows or that, or in TMR diets. Straws, there's a lot of straw being imported there at the minute. So if straw's back, maybe farmers are feeding more silage and hay maybe. So maybe do a fodder budget, just do a quick count of how many bales you have there. Even suckler cow, is going to eat roughly a bale and a half per month, roughly, at maybe 700 kilo bale there, and maybe you're looking at 0.8 of a bale for a strong weanling or a store heifer. And maybe only 0.2 or 0.3 of a bale for a light or 200 kilo whaling. And so just some research there that was done in Teagasc a number of years ago. They looked at 50 round bales of silage being at 65 DMD equated to the same amount of feed as 6 ton of meal. So I suppose if we look at that in figures, 50 round bales at maybe €40 a bale is working out at 2,000, whereas maybe looking at 6 ton of meal at the minute at maybe an average spec ration at 350 is coming in at about 2,100. So look, there's only about it's roughly the same price there for 50 bales and a 6 ton maybe. And look, you might be more guaranteed the quality of the ration than the silage. So look, it's just something farmers should maybe look at, maybe feeding more meal if silage is very tight and if they're buying silage of unknown quality.
That's great, Keith. Thanks very much. And finally, there was some flexibility granted in relation to the National Liming Programme.
Yeah, there was. So farmers now have until the end of March, which obviously was changed there a couple of weeks ago to spread lime. So look, lime, I think the largest amount of lime that has been spread was in the 1980s, to my knowledge. I think there was a grant back then, Catherine. Now, I wasn't born at the time, so I might be corrected on that one. But the most amount of lime that has been spread since was in the 1980s. So look, we've put in a good few applications there for farmers. They're getting €16 a tonne up to 40 tonne. Now, originally the scheme was up to 200 tonne, but that was reduced because an awful lot of people applied for it, and it was probably hard for the department to regulate that scheme as well, Catherine, because an awful lot of, I suppose, advisors, including myself and a lot of farmers, applied for 200 tonne, and an awful lot of them either didn't put out any lime or maybe might have only put out 2 loads or 3 loads or whatever. So look, from looking at receipts from farmers and stuff there, it's looking like the liming scheme is going to cover roughly 50% of the total liming cost. I suppose a couple of years ago, farmers could spread a ton of lime for anywhere from 22 to 25 euro. From looking at receipts there, the lime obviously has increased with diesel costs, etc. So a lot of farmers paying between 30 and 32 or 3 euro there for the lime. So look, it's a great way of getting, lime out to increase your pH, and, it makes a massive difference there in even releasing some phosphorus and potassium in the soil there as well, and getting better use of your fertiliser.
Most definitely, Keith. It really is the starting point for improving grass growth next year, please God. Thanks very much, Keith, for joining me on the show.
Thank you, Catherine.
That's all for this week's episode, and my thanks to Keith for joining me on the show. You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates from our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan, and thanks for listening.